Um, I'm Sheila Zaschek. I'm at Ponderosa Plains Farm in Elizabeth, Colorado. We're out in the garden today. We are a lavender farm and just off County Road 21. And obviously we sell lavender and lavender products, hand sanitizers and eye pillows, yoga mat cleaner. We also sell eggs and plants, and we have chicks right now, except I have roosters. I guess in some cases, dude looks like a lady. So, so I got a rooster for sale if anybody's looking for a young one that they want to teach to cuddle. This all started a few weeks back. I was talking with a friend of mine who was just starting her first garden, and I realized that a lot of people are starting their first gardens for the very first time. I think just the economic situation, a lot of uncertainty going around, and people thought, you know, maybe I should give this a try and get started. So as I was talking to my friend, it occurred to me that I actually had learned a lot in the past few years, and I still remembered what things I would have wanted to know when I was starting. So we've done a little series. The first one was on how to start seedlings indoors and a little bit about outdoors, because some plants can do that here in the spring. And the second one was about how to plant your garden and soil amendments and dealing with pests and disease in plants, just to get you started right. Those two are available on YouTube. This one will be also. So this is actually on irrigation systems. Now, I'm assuming that this assumption I'm making is that you aren't one of those people who wants to stand over your plants with a hose every evening. I'm not one of those people myself. I think it's really good to go out and inspect your plants every evening, but if you just want one less chore to do, then maybe an irrigation system is in the cards for you. One, you know, there's different options on that. I know that a lot of people like to use like sprinklers that throw the water in the air. Out here in Elbert County, it's very arid, and that tends to be a waste of water. A lot of the water evaporates in the air or gets on the leaves and it evaporates before it ever makes it into the root system. So it's a good idea to have an irrigation system that's going to get down closer to the earth and get into the soil before our arid climate gets it. That isn't to say that you can't hand water or use those sprinklers. I've used them in a pinch when I just didn't have my irrigation act together. So those are ways to do that. But when I started, I didn't have money, still don't have money to get like a professionally done in-ground system. So I just started looking online and found some resources, and those resources can be really hard to find. A lot of the information out there just assumes that you're a professional and that you know what you're doing. And so I had to dig pretty deep to find the information that I got. So I thought I would go ahead and share that with you. Now, if you want just a basic starter system, the absolute easiest thing to do is to get yourself a hose, like a length of hose, whatever length of hose that you need to get to the area that you want to irrigate. And then you can buy these at any hardware store. They have these long soaker hoses. They come in different lengths, and it's porous material, and you just lay it down in your garden, weaving it around, and you put the hose into your spigot, you turn it on, and when you feel like there's enough water that's gotten onto the soil, you shut it off. If you want to get real fancy, you can involve a timer. This is probably a little bit more than what you need for doing something like this. There are timer systems that actually have built-in valves, and so there'll be a hose connection coming in that'll go to your spigot, and then there'll be a hose connection coming out that'll go to your hose, and then you put a battery in the timer and you set it, and it just goes. And so there's some really easy little timer systems, and this is just like a quick and dirty soaker system that you can put together really easily and really inexpensively. But this class is assuming that you want to go a little beyond that, because otherwise you don't really need me to tell you that information. But there is some information to know about soaker hoses. And the first is that we have hard water out here in Elbert County, and so you will have to replace your soaker hoses, whether it's one of the store-bought, just hooks up to your regular hose, or one of these quarter-inch hoses that you might use with your irrigation system. You are going to have to replace those. I found with my garden it was maybe like once a year. But you go out just every once in a while and just check them. If they're brittle or they don't seem like they're putting out as much water, then it's time to get a new soaker hose. So that's one thing to know about them. Another thing that you need to know is that soaker hoses, they can come in lengths up to 100 feet. You never want the soaker hose to be more than 100 feet away from your spigot, or the end of your soaker hose will start to lose pressure, and you won't end up getting as much water out of your system as you'd like. So you want it to be within 100, the end to be within 100 feet of your spigot. Now, if you're using like multiple connections off of the same spigot, so you might have multiple soaker hoses coming off of a device like this, you cannot have more than 6 100-foot hoses attached. So so those are things to keep in mind. That's just with regular like household water pressure. It can vary, because water pressure can vary from household to household, but that's just like a general rule of thumb. And it actually comes into play. I use it when I'm planning my regular irrigation system, and so we're going to revisit that. So that's if you're using soaker hoses or you have soaker extensions on your irrigation system, just something to keep in mind. What I'm going to talk to you today is more like a DIY above ground irrigation system. And so some things that you're going to need to plan on is you're going to have to design it, and you're going to have to take into account that your hose lengths and things like that. So this is a pretty basic picture of my lavender field, and these are just straight lines. The more complicated one is actually the smaller of the two, and that is my vegetable garden. This I actually will make a scan and put it in with the materials for the course, and everything I list to you will also be on a PowerPoint that I'll put in the video, so that you can have that for reference. But so this is like a map of my garden. Actually, it's upside down. This is a map of my garden, and you can see what I have is I have a 4-zone system, and the parts that have dotted lines around them means that I actually buried the line. And what I did in cases like that was I bought PVC, and I took my 1/2-inch tubing, which I'll show you here in a minute, and I ran that through it and then buried the whole thing. And the PVC was really more to protect it. And the reason I was burying it is you can see this in traffic areas, and those are areas where I might want to mow or walk across, and I just want to be dealing with an above ground 1/2-inch line. But anyway, this is mapped out into 4 different zones. And the longest zone is this one here. My spigot is down here, and you see the zone comes over here. It has one leg that goes into this planter, and then it follows all the way to the end of the garden on this side. That's probably about 60 to 70 feet of hose there. And so that was something I had to take into account. I was trying to keep under that 100 count in planning my zones. And so that was how I did that. Now, once you have that map made up, you'll also want to take a look at how you're going to do it. So sorry we got disconnected. So I was just showing you down here how the line came in through the ground on that and inside of that PVC pipe, and then I put an L joint, then up, and then another L joint to go across. And so you have to plan like what joints that you're going to need to put in there. We'll talk about those here in a moment. I'll be showing you some different examples. But so once you've got your map of your area drawn out and where you want the hoses, you might have to take a look at more practical considerations like, do I need to go up or down, across? Where do I need to bury? And what kind of joints do I need? And then you can put your shopping list together and have everything ready to build. So then you just need to, we'll start at the faucet. Now the faucet is actually probably the last part of your system that you're going to put together, but we're going to go ahead and start there just because it makes linear sense to me. So the first thing you're going to want to think about, if considering how many zones that you have, is the kind of timer. And there's a lot of different timers. These are the ones that I use. These are 4-zone timers. There are 2 and 3 and single zone timers. And so since this has 4 zones, it actually connects to 4 different valves. This is the valve connection, and you can see it's got a little plug here that plugs into the back of the timer. This is the part that actually controls the flow of water, and it just takes the reading of whether to open or close from this device. This is battery powered. These don't actually use batteries. Now, since I have 4 zones, I connect one of these to my spigot. So each one of these, the spigot's right here, the water's coming from my house. Each one of these is a new spigot for each one of my 4 zones. And so the way this kind of goes together, it's pretty simple. We take this end of my, this end of the valve and hook it on there. So you see the water is coming from the house through here. These turn off and on, so if I want to just shut off a particular zone and not use it, then I can do that. So this is open, the water is going to come through here and then into this valve. This is going to control whether or not the timer says it should be on or off. So this actually has a nice little seat on it, so it hangs on there. But there, like I said, there's lots of different brands. You don't have to use this kind. And then this plugs in. And so that's how this is connected. So each one of these little valves would connect on here. And this, from here, I'm just going to show you with this without the timer on it because you'll want to see. So the next thing that you need on your valve is one of these. This is a backflow preventer. This just means that you won't get dirt, chemicals, or anything from your lawn flowing back into your house and getting into your potable water. So this backflow preventer, it's called an anti-siphon valve. You'll screw that on there and then tighten the screw there and it'll fit on there. The next thing you need, there's 3 components that come after this before you get to any of your tubing. You're gonna need a filter to filter out any little flakes of stuff that might come into the system. You're going to need a pressure regulator because these types of systems need a certain water pressure, so it usually regulates it down below what a typical household water pressure is. And you're also going to need a connector so that this can go into your 1/2-inch tubing. So this is the 1/2-inch tubing, but obviously it doesn't fit with a threaded fitting. So you can get all 3 of those components separately. I use what's called a 3-in-1, which is this guy. So this guy has a little filter on top. I'm not sure if you can see that there. It's in the very top, there's a filter there. And then the body of this is what has the pressure regulator in it. And then the bottom is our converter. And it has little teeth in there that grab onto the 1/2-inch pipe. So I just screw one of these on there and there we have 1 zone ready to go. If I'm using 4 zones, I'm gonna set up 4 of these just like this and then I'm gonna plug them into the timer. So that's the basics of what's happening at the faucet. So you have your splitter, you have your valve control that's plugged into the timer, you have your anti-siphon valve that's keeping backflow from coming in, and then you have the filter, pressure regulator, and adapter for your half-inch line. So half-inch tubing, that's what we're going to go into next. This is the half-inch tubing. These come in like 25 and 50-foot lengths. I tell you, they're pretty unwieldy when they're in really long lengths. And since we use them enough, we went ahead and built a spool for ours. If you're just doing one garden, it's you know, like the first half of what you're doing will be a real pain to deal with the tubing, just getting it off without it being all tangled mess. But you can manage it. You can manage it. So to cut your tubing, there are different kinds of cutters. There is this little guy, which you can probably see in there, has a little blade, and you just put it on the outside of your tubing like so, and you tighten it down, and you tighten it down, and then you turn. These have a tendency to spiral, and so I don't really love them very much. But you see, it does make kind of even cut there. The one that I like is this. It's more like scissors. It's got a spring action on it, and you just hook it in there and tighten down. You might have to turn it a little bit, but pretty much it'll pop right through there, and you get a nice cut. So you're going to have to be able to cut your tubing down to the lengths that you want. What you can measure and then cut. I normally just lay it down where I want it to be, and then I cut it. I think that's just simpler. So those are kind of the tools that you need with your half-inch. Then you're going to need your connectors. So the most important connector you're going to need is obviously an end piece. This has the teeth fitting on it, and then on the other end is a screw cap. This I put at the end of the line to just, you know, to stop the line. And these come in really handy later on when you get to the end of the season and you need to blow out the water and shut down the irrigation system for the winter. So you'll take these screw caps off, and then you'll push pressurized air through the system, and it'll just blow out all the excess water. Another one that's handy to have, just because we have this connected into this system, those teeth bite in there, and it's really difficult to get this disconnected to use for your clean out. So, and then actually it can damage those teeth too. And yeah, so it's better if you have some other kind of a connector. This is a T connector somewhere along the line in your system with a cap on it, so you can pull that cap off and blow out your system from the top of the system all the way out to the end. So these are kind of important to have in there. And then we have, I was telling you about the elbow joints, which get you around corners and up and down and around, whichever way you need to orient them. So these elbow pieces, and then T's. T's are really handy if you're coming like up a center aisle and you want to cross, you want to go out in different directions. You can use one of these T's. Again, all of these have like the little teeth on them. There are some other brands that have, they're done with barbs that you stick inside. I found them really kind of difficult to use. And these can be difficult too. In fact, I will just tell you this. What I do is I lay out my whole system with all the connectors, and I try to connect them myself, and no matter how much brute force I put into it, I never get it right. And so when I get everything laid out, and then I call my husband, I'm like, Salt, come over here. And I have him press everything together for me. And he does a good job. And it seems like I can do it sometimes, but sometimes it just doesn't work out for me. So those are the basics of your half-inch line. Now you can put drip emitters in your half-inch line, and that just directly from it. So like for instance, in the lavender field, you see that there's these lines that go straight in a line. And so wherever there's a plant, we just punched a hole in the half-inch line and put in a drip emitter. And for large projects like that, there are extra considerations besides just distance from the spigot. And if there's time, I will talk about that later. But just know that you can do that. This is the type of drip emitter that goes directly into the 1/2-inch pipe. And what you do to get that in there, you see that it has a little barb on the end. But this, you can't really just force this through with your hand. So what you're going to need, the other tool that you need is a punch. Now they have some thumb punches, which are little pin. They're horrible. Don't get those. You'll just spend the day hurting yourself. So this basically just fits over like that. You put it in the little thing, and then pop, and you'll hear a snap, and there it is. You have a hole. And then you can take your emitter and you can put it in there. Oh, I missed it. So just put the emitter on the hole and you press it in there and it'll go right in. Now, you may want to put extensions on there. And so you can certainly do that with these connectors to connect different 1/2-inch tubing pieces. But if you have something that you want to do is a little maybe finer, or maybe you're in a flower garden, you don't want it to be as noticeable as a 1/2-inch, then you can switch to 1/4-inch tubing. And what you do is you make a branch off of your 1/2-inch tubing by poking one of these holes in and then filling it with one of these barbs. So barbs come in different shapes. I mean, they're usually just like this. This is like a single barb. And then there are also elbows, which are a little harder to put in, but actually really nice if you have a line that you want to be able to move around, because these will pivot. They also have T-shaped barbs, so if you want it to go out in different directions, you can do that. The T-shapes are really good if you need to connect 1/4-inch. So here's some of our 1/4-inch options. They come, got them here. So this is like a typical 1/4-inch, and then you see that sometimes they come in different colors, like you can get them brown. There also is a soaker hose version of the 1/4-inch. So with these barbs, the barbs will fit into the 1/4-inch opening, and then you can also use the T-shapes to connect several 1/4-inch tubing pieces. I'm just going to show you real quick how I connect these, because there is an easy way that they don't explain in the books. So one of the tools I found to be, or actually most tools for when you're handling the 1/4-inch tubing are these. So this first pair is a pair of wire cutters, but they have a flat edge on them, which comes in handy when you're making repairs. But you can use this when you're cutting your tubing to the length that you want. You just snap it and pull, and there it is. It's the length that you want. So that's kind of handy. But when it comes to putting on barbs, this is the tool you want. So for a barb, let me set this down. What I'll do is I will take the barb and I will put it in that nice little gap right there. And then I will set it up against the hole that I made. So there it is sitting on the hole, and then I pop it in. And I use the side of the wrench to put the pressure on these little, otherwise it gets hands, and so that's really handy. And then it's just a simple matter of taking your 1/4-inch tubing and pressing it on there until it's all the way on. And then there you have it. You have a 1/4-inch tube connected to a 1/2-inch. And then what do you do at the end of your 1/4-inch tubing? So again, you want to be looking at emitters. And there's different kinds of emitters. This is a common one that I use a lot. It actually makes like a little fountain, and you see that it has a stake, so you can stick it in the ground where you want it. And then this, the 1/4 inch goes right into this alarm, and then it makes like a little fountain. Maybe goes out about a foot, 6 inches in every direction from where it is. This is called a bubbler. Another one that I like a lot, these work a little bit like a regular sprinkler, so that you see it has that little and it also has a little valve on here to control water pressure, so that helps to control like about how far it is. Now these come in separate pieces. There's a stake here, and then the top sprinkler fitting, and then there's this tube, and they just fit together really easily. They're really easy to go together, and then the 1/4 inch tubing connects down here and feeds up through the line, and it goes out like that. And you can put these out wherever you want, but it's on a little riser, so it's a little bit higher. So these can be really handy. It's one of my favorites. Other ones are misters. Misters come in full circle, half circle, and 1/4 circle. You can use them on risers like that one. I use them a lot with hanging plants. So in my backyard, I have some hanging plants along my deck, and I have 1/2 inch tubing that is suspended in there, and then I have these 1/4 inches coming down with little misters directly over where the hanging plants are. So these can be really handy for that. They come on and off really easily, so you can change them out really easily. And then if you don't want to use your 1/4 inch tubing, you can put an end cap on it. You can also use these end caps if for some reason you pull a 1/4 inch tubing out, or a spring's a leak or something, you can stick one of these end caps in there. These come in really handy. These also come in really handy when you're using soakers. So one of the things that I do with soakers is I will put them into my 1/2 inch pipe, and then I will maybe wrap it around a plant or a tree once or twice, depending on what I want, and then put an end cap on it. And so then the soaker is just soaking that particular area, and it's not spraying out everywhere. So end caps are very important to have around. I think that's all the emitters I have. Oh, yeah, no, I have these ones. This is what's called an inline emitter. And inline emitters are, say you have a long length of 1/4 inch or pieces of 1/4 inch, and you would put this in between them. So you would put this emitter here and lay it down where you wanted it, and then connect the next piece of 1/4 inch tubing on the other side, and just keep going down the line, watering along the way. So this is what's called an inline emitter. So yeah, those are different kinds of emitters that you have. There's obviously these drip emitters, and there's different versions of these little drip emitters that you can just do for like a little localized area. So I think that's all of those. Any questions on that? You can always email me later too. I'm glad to answer any questions. Let's see. Before I let these go, I want to make sure. Oh, yeah. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about maintenance. What time are we at? Okay, so we've got time. Before we talk about designing for a large area. So maintenance, this takes a lot of planning, and installation the first time takes a lot of time. When I go to set up my irrigation every year, probably the most time-consuming part, now that I've got everything where I want it in the yard, probably the most time-consuming part is just getting all of this stuff together and getting the timer set. But maintenance-wise, I thought after my first year, I thought, wow, this took a lot of time to put together. It's going to take forever to keep it up. And like replacing those little 1/4 inch soaker hoses because they got calcified, or repairing the 1/4-inch lines, one thing that happens is that these little barbs get brittle and they break, or your dog plays with it, or they get moved or whatever, and it just doesn't like it, and they snap off. And I just thought it was going to take forever to repair, but it turns out that no, repairs are pretty simple. Usually you're just taking one thing off and putting another thing on. The most common one though is these people. I'm just going to, these little barbs. And what will happen, I'm just going to go ahead and cut it and I'll show you what happens. Is it'll get brittle and you'll end up with this guy breaking out. Well, I'm not going to be able to cut it anyway. I don't usually cut these off like this. So. Okay, there we go. So that's close. I got it mostly off. Okay, so you end up, you come out to your garden and the dog's been messing around in your flower bed and you find this lying off somewhere else and this sitting here and there's a piece of this in there, or there's nothing in there and it's just spraying water everywhere. So you have the option, you can just close it off by dropping one of these in there, or you can repair it, which is most likely what you're going to want to do. So what I do is I will take my trusty pliers and I will push that guy back in the line. Just, there's no way to get it out of there. It'll blow out when you clean out your system at the end of the season. So just pop that in there. And then I have this guy, and sometimes you can pull him out and sometimes not. And if you can't, then you get your trusty pliers again and you snip it. So done, that's not a problem anymore. So now you're down to, you have your hole, you have your 1/4-inch line. You're going to take your barb, put it in your pliers like so. So it's sitting on there, and then pop the new one on, drop the new one on there, and voila, it's done. This takes about 10 minutes to fix one of these, and that includes the time it took you to walk to the garage to get the pliers. So, so maintenance on these once they're set up isn't actually too bad. So take heart. It is kind of worth the effort. I also should mention that you will, once you get your timer all set up, you want to keep an eye on it. I have a tendency to underwater, and I don't let them run as long as they should. So yeah, you will at first have to watch to make sure that your plants are getting enough water. You can run tests, like on the first day. It'll take a while for you to run tests to figure out how much water each zone needs. And that is another consideration when you're designing your garden, is whether or not you've got plants that need a lot of water and might want to be on the same time settings as opposed to other ones that might not need as much. And then the last piece of maintenance is obviously blowout at the end of the season. We talked about that. You can get an air compressor with a special fitting that fits in the 1/2-inch tubing. You put it into your little slot and your T slot and take off the end caps all the way down the line and just blow out the water until water stops coming out. And then replace all the caps, and then you're ready for winter. Now, I always take I will leave this part of the device out in the yard attached to the tubing because it will screw off. But the rest of this I take in to the house. So yeah, that's, are we still recording? Great, we are still recording. So yeah, any questions? I mean, this is just super, super simple. So I was going to show you to just like what some special considerations you have with regard to a larger system. So this is a lavender field, and these rows are about 40 feet long. So the spigot's over here. So you have the length from here all the way down to the end. to consider in terms of the length of how much tubing you have in your system. Again, you don't want it to be more than 100 feet. These are like right at 100 feet or close to. And but the other thing you have to take into consideration is how many emitters you're going to have on that line, because those rows have about 30 plants in them. And if you're putting an emitter at every plant, well, you have to make sure you have the water pressure to get the plants out to them. So you're going to draw out your field, and you're going to measure everything, and then start considering, you know, how many 100-foot, am I 100 foot away? How many 100-foot lines do I have? That's more for soaker hoses, but I use it kind of as a general rule. But that isn't the whole picture, because that right there might actually, if you have a lot of emitters in there, that might actually still not give you enough water pressure if you have too many emitters. So like this guy right here, this is a special emitter that is 2 gallons per hour. That's what it is designed to do, is put out 2 gallons of water per hour. There are 1 gallon per hour emitters. There are ½ gallon per hour emitters. These go straight into the ½ line, so it's just like you pop it in, and just like this, there's just one of these emitters at every plant. And but you need to know that you've got enough water going through there. So the way to do it is to just do a water test. So you go out to your spigot, maybe around the same time that you're planning to water with, and you take your smartphone, and on your clock, there is a stopwatch. So you're going to go to the stopwatch setting. You can put the bucket down. You're going to start the stopwatch, open the spigot, fill the 5-gallon bucket, stop the stopwatch, close the spigot. And do that a few times. Take an average of like how many seconds are you filling a 5-gallon bucket. And then I'm going to explain this here, but there will be a slide with all the math. And just make sure you get it all in the right order, because it's a little tricky. So now you have the number of seconds it takes to fill a 5-gallon bucket. So if you divide that by 5 gallons, you will know how many seconds it takes to make 1 gallon. And then you need to convert that into gallons per hour. So to do that, you're going to take 60 seconds per minute and divide it by the number of seconds per gallon. And that's going to give you the number of minutes the number of gallons per minute. And then you're going to take 60 minutes per hour and multiply that times your gallons per minute number, and that's going to give you the number of gallons per hour. And then you'll know that you can put, if it says that you have 240 gallons an hour, then you can put 241 gallon per hour emitters on your system, and know that you'll have enough water pressure, theoretically. Now, the water pressures can change, particularly if you got something else going on or another system running. But yeah, so that's just another limitation that you need to consider. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And I know that sounds, I don't know, it's both complicated and easy. There is a lot to it in the planning phases of putting these together. There's just a lot of things you have to consider about your water pressure and the distance of your hoses and what your water pressure is. But it actually is pretty simple. Once you actually have that plan put together, it gets easy. And of course, you can have any questions, you can email me, ponderosaplains@gmail.com, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Also, look online. It is, what is it? Orbitsonline.com. That's the company that I get a lot of my irrigation equipment through. And they have videos. Now, they used to have book guides, and I still have mine. It's all water staged and crazy looking, but I still have mine. I don't think that they have those anymore, but they do have video guides to do different things with irrigation, so that's a good resource. But of course, there are lots of different brands. There's Rainbird, and I'm not sure what all the others are, but anyway. Anybody have questions? Let me know. Send me an email. And thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your weekend. We're ready to plant. Starting to harden plants next week. And probably sometime after Memorial Day, we will start putting our warm weather plants in the ground. So have a great day. Thanks for watching.